Hello and welcome to IS Primers. My name is Shubhashish and you're watching today's daily news analysis. Now today is 1st of April and you're watching the Hindu Papers Delhi edition. And as part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice. And on an average, I give 1 or 2 questions daily. And you can get your answers evaluated for free, so up to 2 answers every week. Now today I have 2 questions. So one is about the Assam-Meghalaya Border Pact. So this is a very direct question that I'm asking. Normally UPSC will ask questions on, this is an internal security topic, so GS3. So they will ask a question about Northeast, that there is sustained militancy in the insurgency in the Northeast and what are the measures responsible for it. So that way they are asking, or the role of the border states, border countries. So here is very specific because I feel I'll get a lot of opportunities to ask. Even this question was more or less about, this article was more or less about the Northeast. But I want to be very specific about this particular thing. I want you to have a note on this issue. That is why I am framing a question on this subject. Rest, we'll get a lot of opportunities for asking questions on Northeast or the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Then there was something new. India prepared for climate refugees. So climate refugees, new term. And Center tells Lok Sabha that obviously they said that we are doing a lot of things about this. So when the government says they are prepared, so naturally they must have said certain things. So I have a question with reference to the challenges associated with the climate change and what measures should India take. So let's get started. So the first topic. So as we discussed earlier, the Deputy National Security Advisor of the United States of America, the person who's responsible for designing of the sanctions on Russia. So the idea of the sanctions was, we all know it, that impose sanctions on Russia, impose an economic cost on Russia, undermine their currency, ruble, so that they stop the war or stop the aggression that they have done on Ukraine. So that was the very idea over here of the United States. But India is keen on getting oil from Russia. India wants to have normal relations. India has military that has equipments from Russia, be it AK-47, be it AK-203, be it S-400, Sukhois. From where will the spares come? How will the maintenance take place? So we want that. And furthermore, we also believe that Russia can play a role in controlling China, specifically with reference to the tensions on the line of actual control, Ladakh region, Arunachal Pradesh, that part. We have already had the border dispute to 2020 Galwan issue. So we have number of issues that way, and we want to have normal relations, and the sanctions don't bode well for us, especially India-Russia relationship. So he has almost, this is plain talk, more than a plain talk. It says, Deputy NSA warns India of consequences. And I can think of one thing, I don't know, he doesn't say what consequences, but there is a law of USA which is basically titled as Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. So that implies, first of all, the sanction is imposed by USA. Right? That is very clear. So it is combating America's adversaries through sanctions. Now, this is a law of the USA. It is a bilateral thing. It is not coming from the UN. So it doesn't have any international legitimacy as such. But USA has such heft and power that they can do things. Okay. Now, one of the conditions of that law is that any country, be it India or any country which engages with Russia, they can be under USA sanction also, because they are undermining their sanctions, and they are also their adversary in that way. So that can happen. So this undermines US efforts. So therefore, whenever we are looking at the sanctions thing, we always refer to the term, we are seeking exemptions from USA. With reference to Iran also, we said we were seeking exemptions for the construction of the Chabahar port or for getting the oil over here. So likewise, we are seeking exemptions. So he's saying there will be consequences. And let's read more, because this is this is very severe language, right? Okay, so one is this, and he says anybody, be it India or any other country, which props up the Russian ruble. Russia's foreign minister is going to come to our country. Before that, he comes. So the foreign minister, we believe that one of the objectives of him coming to our country is they want to have trade, and Russia is saying that, see, the fuel prices are very high in your country, India, it's very, very high. We will offer you at a discounted price, but only condition is you pay us in rubles, you pay us in a local currency, or we may have some ruble Russia relation, ruble rupee exchange, currency swap agreement can be there. Right, so that is what we believe they are going to say over here, and plus how we can intensify a relationship. But bottom line is this. So if we trade in ruble, so it is propping up the ruble. In fact, ruble currency has done much better after the sanctions. We thought it will fall down, but it has done much better. Because even with Europe also, EU countries are also buying oil, and now they cannot buy it in dollars because the dollar is controlled by US, and US has imposed sanctions. So they are insisting on rubles. So ruble has actually gained more credibility in the recent times. Okay, so this is it. And one more thing, so somebody asked, okay, fine, India is not heeding to you, and within the Quad members also, which are the Quad members, Japan, Australia, USA and India. So all of them are with the US stance over here, only exception being India. So it says, does it undermine the Quad partnership? He says, no. But again, here you see, it's very undiplomatic, because he says that we have a shared recognition that in the Quad that China is a strategic threat. They never say China, never ever. Neither India will directly say. We know it is targeted at China, but we never openly say it. So he's saying it. Let's see what happens. What is the rebuttal? But yes, we don't have a direct rebuttal as such, but we have a statement from our External Affairs Minister, Mr. Jaishankar. So this was on page 1. This is page 13. Here you can see. So Mr. Jaishankar says that it seems there is a campaign against India. So many political leaders from other countries are coming to our country. It seems there is some sort of an effort to undermine our credibility. Think about it. He's come, NSA of Deputy NSA. We have from UK, they have come. There was a virtual summit between Australia and India. So a lot of things are going on. Japanese Cabinet Secretary had come to our country. So, and all of them, some way or the other, whatever they said, it was about, please tell India, please India, why don't you put pressure? You have good relations with Russia. If you tell them, then things will be okay. If you don't, then see what things may not be as good. Right, so it's somewhere it is putting India in the bad light. But he says, look at this. You guys yourself, European Union nations, you people are coming to our country and telling us don't buy oil, but you yourself are buying oil from Russia. And you are telling us not to do it and buy at the discounted rate. We are only doing what we should do, which is in the best interest of our country. Right. Now let us see what rebuttal comes, because this is very, very strong language. And let's see what happens. Areas under Armed Forces Special Powers Act regime reduced, says the Home Minister of our country, Mr. Shah. So first things first, what is Armed Forces Special Powers Act? I thought I'll ask you a question on the assessment of Armed Forces Special Powers Act, but then I thought a lot of opportunities will come. Let's do that other question. Okay, so Armed Forces Special Powers Act is it's basically deployed in disturbed areas. Which areas? Disturbed areas. So this could be a part of a state, like let's say Nagaland is there, so it could be the entire state, or it could be certain parts of that. Right. Now disturbed areas are defined. Who decides it? That so and so place is a disturbed area and military should be pushed. Basically normal police will not work. We need some battle hardened force over there. Militancy is there, something like that. So this was brought in context of Nagaland, and it has been there for a number of years. Okay, so who decides? So this comes from section 3 of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which says, because this is important for your prelims, the governor of a state shall determine if a particular area is in a disturbed area. Now, let me put it this way. We know that the governor functions in accordance with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So, if the Council of Ministers says, let's see, we are not happy with your views on disturbed areas, please don't do it. Well, this is a discretionary power. Clear? The final say is that of the governor and not of the COM, Council of Ministers. So initially it was only governor, but later in 1970s, the center was also given this authority. And by the way, governor is an agent of the president at the state level. Right? So center and the governor, not the chief minister. Governor and the center can decide if a particular area is a disturbed area. That also means revocation of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act from a particular place. Now, when we say special, Armed Forces Special Powers, these special powers are coming from Section 4 of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Fine, they can shoot to kill. They don't need a permission from the district magistrate. They can arrest anybody. And this is because they are working in such difficult terrains. So these exemptions are somehow seen justified. Clear. So who invokes? We have done this. Assessment of Armed Forces Special Powers Act has already been asked. Briefly, I'll just give you an idea about this. This is brought to bring in an environment of peace, normalization of situation, so that political processes can take over. So it should be very clear. It has been there since 70 years now, 60-70 years it has been there. We expect peace, but peace has not come. In fact, the situation still remains more or less bad only. Yes, in the recent times we may say that some improvement is there, but then again things get bad. What about the state of Jammu and Kashmir? So time and again something or the other takes place. So an assessment in that regard, that it is, should we have it, should we not have it? Does it lead to violation of human rights? What are the views of the committees like Justice Verma Committee, Santosh Hegde Committee report? They have very critical views of it. Some say that army will not agree with this, but people say that okay, fine, we need this law. Then it should not be a standalone law. It should be under a bigger anti-terror law like Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The views of the second ARC. Now all of this will do subsequently. Right? This thing otherwise will become very long. Insurgency in Northeast has been asked. This is a topic of insurgency in Northeast. Now let's move ahead now. So disturbed areas. He says this reduction has taken place because of the works of a great Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, his vision. Right? Home Minister is saying, okay. So this is the result of the improved security situation. We have given the free hand to the military. Right? Improved security situation. We have had fast track development. So development is there. People are engaged. They are employed. So all of this is sorted. Then several agreements to end insurgency. Which agreements? Remember, one announcement was made at 8 o'clock. There were many other announcements other than the one that is very famous or infamous. Okay, so Naga Accords. There are other agreements only. That's what I'm saying. Naga Accords. Then the agreement with the Bodos, National Democratic Front of Bodoland, this is a militant organization. Likewise, the militant organization of the Tripura, National Liberation Front of Tripura. Then the Bruriang crisis. So we have done number of things, negotiated with the militant groups and told them that you have to function in accordance with the constitutional framework of a country only. Okay. So they are now discussing about this issue, and one thing that complicated the situation altogether was the protests in Nagaland, particularly after the botched up military operation, where because of some wrong intelligence reports plus maybe army not verifying, they simply shot at some civilians and 13 people died in the process. Now this is important from the point of view of constitution and prelims also. Supreme Court strikes down Tamil Nadu 1-year quota. So this is naturally a community, and this community is mentioned in the NCERT, and such things UPSC tends to pick up. So 1 year is formed the laboring poor. So when you are reading your NCRTs, for example, what do you understand by the term Komatis, and 4 options are given to you. So this you have to be very particular because you can't guess. You have to be very, very sure about these things, right? So when you're reading your 6th, 7th NCRTs, and I always say this, that the history part is actually easy. It's not difficult, but most videos you'll find on this YouTube, they'll say it's hard. But it's this only that is being asked, and maybe some additional reading. Just you have to be watchful. That's all. So these some things I've marked over here. Do read about them, right? So Pariyars, Paniers, Komatis, Vellalars. Now what happened in the court? So basically, the state of Tamil Nadu, they said, okay, fine, we have reservation for scheduled caste, we have reservation for scheduled tribes, we have reservation for OBC. Normally this is around 14-50% of the entire quota. Now they said that there are certain people who are OBCs, but they are as backward as scheduled caste. So this they called it as most backward community, and for that they created a reservation of 20%. So 20% additional reservation. Fine. Now, I mean, this can also be challenged on the grounds that it violates Supreme Court's verdict on Indrasani case, where it said that the reservation has to be fixed at 50%. It cannot go beyond this. Right? It undermines the merit component. Okay. So 20%. Now within this 20%, that is still, that good thing had not even come up actually. Thus in Indrasani thing. Within this 20%, 10.5% is reserved for only one community, the 1-year quota. And I presume it is because politically speaking, they may be a powerful group and can influence the elections. So if they are favored. So 10.5% of all the communities that are there, only this one gets 50% of the share. This doesn't seem justified. Prima facie doesn't. And that is what the court said, that they are not able to establish on what basis they have said that 10.5% quota should be given. Right. So first time, naturally, since it is Supreme Court, so the case was first heard at the High Court. High Court rejected, not acceptable. So they went, okay, fine, we don't accept. So they appealed at the Supreme Court. They said, yes, the High Court is right. Fine. So this was done by the Special Reservation Act 2021. A lot of topics actually. I had to really do it. Okay. Allow us, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu met Mr. Narendra Modi, and first thing he said was, you are doing so much for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is under debt. There is crisis. Why don't you give us an opportunity? We are also sensitive to the cause of the Sri Lankan Tamils in particularly. So we can provide them essentials, drugs, you name it, we can provide them. We can do things for them. Right, so this is one thing over here. The other thing, since he is meeting, he'll not meet just for one cause. So he said that, see, you said that GST will be introduced. Right, we all know GST was introduced, and GST is basically the indirect tax. So when you buy something inclusive of MRP, you're paying a tax actually. It's indirect tax. One is the direct tax like income tax, corporate tax. Directly, it is imposed on you. But when you buy something, the shopkeeper is paying it, but you are being charged for that. The incidence is on you. Okay. So GST. Anyways, so GST is collected. So earlier what used to happen was there were multiple taxes at the state level, at the center level. So there was a need felt that there should be a common GST, single tax. But then center may have a common tax, right? One tax across the country. But each state had their own set of laws, own set of taxes. Like sales tax, octroi, Bombay had a lot of taxes. So the states had so many taxes, but now they had to let go because they wanted to have a common tax, that is the GST, across the country. So here what happened was, naturally, when there were so many taxes, the states are surrendering their taxes, surrendering their power to collect tax, and this would have also amounted to laws of tax collection or laws of revenue collection. So center as a compromise said, see, you are losing money, we know, we understand, So what we can do is we can have a GST compensation cess. So 1% extra people have to pay whenever they're buying things, especially on demerit goods, bad things which are not very good for us. Okay, so within that 1% is collected, so money goes to the GST cess, and the loss that the states have incurred, that is paid for a certain number of years. But we all know that the last 2-3 years have not been good for the economy, and the states lost because of this. So it says extend the period of GST compensation. Right. Then the other issue over here is the Kudankulam project. Kudankulam, Tamil Nadu, there was protest in the recent times. So Kudankulam has basically Russians have, with India, with partnership with Russia, has established the Kudankulam nuclear power plant. Simple. Now the nuclear waste that is being generated, that is being buried over there. Right. So spent nuclear fuel. So he says this is created. Russians give us, right? Send it back to Russia. So this is what he is saying, that ultimately maybe this nuclear thing will be bad. The waste that is there, it will still be radioactive. That place will be unusable. So you export it back to Russia over here. Then comes drop the neutrino observatory project. So there is a project known as INO, Indian Neutrino Observatory. Whose task is to observe neutrinos. Right, so whose task is to observe the neutrinos. Now, what are neutrinos? Actually, you know what, I believe this should also be prepared as a mains component altogether, but this would take me a bit of time. So maybe some other day when there is a more of analysis, I'll cover this. I'll keep this in mind. Okay, so neutrino. So neutrino is, you know, there is atom at the lowest level. Then they said within the atom there is proton, neutron, electron. I said neutron, not neutrino. So it is distinct. So there are other fundamental elementary particles also, and one of them is neutrino. And please take care that it is not neutron. Right? It is not neutron. It is distinct from that. It is separate. Now these neutrinos are like air. They just keep traveling from one place to another, from space to another, and they can pass through anything. Like maybe neutrinos may be passing through me, or maybe it may pass through the earth and go elsewhere. So neutrinos, they want to study it because it cannot be specifically with the sun. So what they did was, this Indian Neutrino Observatory, they are making in a mountain. There is this Theni forest, Theni mountain in Tamil Nadu. So there they are constructing this, digging up this mountain and trying to create this cave. So they want to create this environment where it will be feasible to observe neutrino, because they are very, very hard to observe. And knowing about them may tell us that they may be traveling from far, far away from us. They may be able to tell us about the black holes. They may be able to tell us about the space, maybe more developments that we can't even imagine of. Right? So that way. But the problem is, you are digging this thing. Maybe it will cause pollution. Then there is obviously, people can easily confuse neutrino and neutrons. And neutrons, nuclear waste, radioactive, harm to the society, harm to the forest community, all of this. Right, so this is it. You can, by the way, by all means, please, you can read this article also. So that will be helpful. Now, dip in Chilka Lake's dolphin population. So what is happening? First of all, what is Chilka Lake? This is important. So this is Odisha these days, right? So on your map also you can see this is this area. So this is lagoon basically. So it is a brackish water. Lagoon is salt water. It's sea is salt water. It's not a fresh water. So this is this thing, and it is on the mouth of Daya river, and it is the biggest lake of India after Vembanad Lake. Where is Vembanad Lake? In Kerala. Okay, so this is there. Now questions can be asked like this, the ones that I have marked. It could also be asked like this way, like for Chilka it wasn't asked, it was asked for Pulicat, this thing, that it is between which two major rivers, like Mahanadi, Godavari, like that, Krishna, Kaveri, like that it was asked. Options were there. Okay. Now this Chilka Lake is a Ramsar site. It is which is a convention for the wetland of international importance. That this is an internationally important site, and it is important for its biodiversity, for the Irrawaddy dolphins, and all of this. Okay, so it's very, very important. And furthermore, it used to be, it is not, it used to be under the Montreux records. Both have been asked repeatedly in prelims. So Montreux records is given by which agency? I think it's Wetland International, but please do verify this. Right? So Ramsar, and then it used to be on the Montreux, but it has been removed from Montreux records. So this you have to be careful. Which of the following are in the Montreux? Normally you will find Ramsar and Montreux will match, but in this case it is not. And Montreux records has those wetlands where ecological changes, disturbances have been witnessed. So those wetlands are marked over here. Okay, so this we have done. Now let's come to Irrawaddy dolphin. Now what is Irrawaddy, by the way? Okay, population has dipped, a census was done. That's very simple to know. Okay, now coming to Irrawaddy dolphin. Now Irrawaddy is basically it's a river dolphin. We have Gangetic dolphins also. So those are also river dolphins. They are in the fresh water, and by the way, they are blind. They can't see. They work via the sonar, radio waves. Okay, this river is there, Irrawaddy river in this region, Myanmar, and right now you check which all countries are part of this thing. Okay, so it is the river that flows from north to south into the Bay of Bengal, and country's largest river and most important waterway. So on this, because these dolphins are found, we call them as Irrawaddy dolphin. But if it is Irrawaddy dolphin, it should be here only. Why is it in the Chilka Lake? What is it doing? Hanging around? Right? What is it doing? So, and how can it go by the sea if it is a freshwater ship, a freshwater this thing? Right? This is not salt water. So Irrawaddy dolphin is a euryhaline species. Euryhaline species means a species, or in this case a dolphin, which can tolerate the variations in salinity. So thereby it is there, not just in the Bay of Bengal, Chilka Lake. It is also found in different parts of Southeast Asia, including Australia. So in different parts it is seen. Now comes the mains based question. Okay, so this is the question. Please do read it. Bring out the essentials of the recent Assam-Meghalaya border pact. How can it pave way for peace in Northeast India? Let me give you a context with the help of a map over here, first of all. So when I say peace in Northeast India, so there are a number of factors because of which there is instability in Northeast. Number of factors. One of the reasons is the concern with reference to changes in ethnicity. There are different ethnic people, plus it is forested, it's forested, it is mountainous, so geographical isolation is there, so people are more conscious that they are distinct from others. Imagine UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, they'll easily mix Rajasthan because it's the plains. It was easy that integration is there, but not here. So they're very, very conscious of this thing. And for example, I'll give you one example. Nagaland, not Nagaland actually, this is the Naga Hills, basically there by Nagaland. The Naga people, the militant group which has left arms, NSCN, IM, and the militant group Kaplang also. So they are demanding for Greater Nagaland. Now this is the Nagaland attached to Assam. They think the adjoining areas is also Naga Hills, and this should be made part of Naga land, which they call it as Nagalim, Naga homeland basically. So when Naga Accords is being talked about, naturally other states, Arunachal, Assam, Manipur, adjoining states are worried about it, because it may be that they have an agreement that the boundaries of other states will be compromised. So this is there. Likewise, we have example of the Manipur, Meitei. Meitei is a plain community plus the Nagas and the Kukis. Likewise, here also there is a dispute. Now they are still from the same region, but how about the Ahoms and the Assamese and the Meghalayas, or the conflict between the Assamese and the different, very distinct culture, people speaking as Assamese, following different rituals, customs, practices as compared to the Nagas. So there is a problem, and in fact, the insurgency that they started in the northeast. So basically, because it was a common state of Assam, which was given the official language, and then the people obviously imagine Assam as the official language of Nagaland, Manipur, etc. People rose up in arms against this. They were concerned about their culture. First, political power is going, then the entire culture will go, then outsiders will come. Right. So those were the concerns. So what? At least one thing could be done is that these places have both claim each other's territories. All these states specifically are joining Assam, because all of this was Assam. Then Assam was carved out into northeast frontier agencies, which we today know it as Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Tripura, and Meghalaya. So all of them have a dispute with Assam. So at least on this front, we can have normalization of ties if the borders are agreed upon. So here we have a situation where Assam and Meghalaya have a border pact. They have an agreement on the border. Now the question is that how can it pave way for peace in Northeast India? And this is borrowed from this title over here, the agreement to resolve 6 disputed points along Assam-Meghalaya border, which is a model one. That means it can be a template for negotiations with other states also. So this we can learn, we can learn from this experience. So let us see what they say. So first of all, we have a situation where the Assam Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma and Meghalaya counterpart Conrad Sangma. So both chief ministers talked and deliberated. So by means of talk, deliberations, consultations, both were able to come to a conclusion that the disputed points, so in this case 6 disputed points, will be shared amongst themselves amicably. Right? 6 disputed points. And this was done on the basis of give and take spirit, give and take approach. See, it's very simple. If Naga people say, Naga and Assam are negotiating and they say that this is ours only, we will not compromise. Assam says, okay, fine, but we want it, you are not willing to compromise, so we cannot have a talk. Likewise with Arunachal or any other place. So you give me some, if you want some, okay, fine, but you at least give us this. So that approach, basically give and take approach. So this shows that even the most complicated of relations demonstrated that naughty is not naughty being notorious, it's just that knots. So knots and very complicated, it's very difficult to open. So even those can be resolved by means of talks and deliberations and on the basis of give and take approach. And we found that hardly both the states, whatever they were claiming, they were able to get almost the same amount of area. So this worked very well. And furthermore, obviously there are certain, let's say Assam, Meghalaya, there were certain territories of Meghalaya which will go to Assam, and likewise for, vice versa. So there would be people who were in Meghalaya would become now in Assam. So they may have certain reservations. So they may choose, the people may choose as to where they want to live, right? So they will have this possibility over here. Clear? So this is bring out the essentials of the recent Assam-Meghalaya border pact. You have the essentials over here. You can give an introduction in the start and then say these are the essentials. Now after this, what will happen? This will be surveyed. This were talks. But somebody has to survey on the ground also, so Survey of India will do it. But these are again talks between the state, and we know that it is the reorganization of the states, the changing of the boundaries of the states can only be done by the parliament. Which article? Mention in the comment section. Okay, if you remember, please search and mention in the comment section. Okay, so parliament can do it, right? So you have the essentials over here. Now, how can it pave way for peace in Northeast India? Now you can bring the aspect that different states, there is this element of ethnicity, then different states have conflict with each other, or people have conflict with each other over the issue of the boundaries, over the issue of the polity, administration. Right? So this is there. Sometimes it may get very, very bad also. For example, in July 2021, 5 policemen and a civilian, basically Assam and Mizoram, they had a disagreement and police people started to shoot on each other. So Assam police and Mizo police. Many a times this may lead to issues of rioting, right? So rioting, chaos. So these things take place. So in this scenario, at least from the point of view of the states itself, so states in the boundary issue, so both can learn the lessons from this fact, take these learnings, and specifically in this scenario where all of the states have, most of the disputes are with Assam because most of the states are carved out of Assam, right? So in that way, both the border disputes can be amicably settled amongst other states also. So we can draw the right lessons from there. Now, suggestion also, we can also work on confidence building measures. For example, initially we can, rather than focusing on militarizing this thing, so when we have more and more military, more and more armed people, then tensions increase, there is lack of trust. But if both CMs or anybody, they have a discussion, okay, fine, we will not have arms, we will have state police who is patrolling the borders but without arms, so wherever possible. So that will build trust, that will build confidence. So that will also pave way for normalization of ties. So this can pave way for peace in Northeast India. Now there are many other things that needs to be done, but this is just one perspective. And do remember, this answer is only 150 words. So 150 words means about a one page or 1.5 at best. UPSC gives you 1.5, so on your A4 sheet it will be 1/4 of a page. Right? And I don't want you to refer anything, I just want you to practice this by just focusing on this article only, because you don't have as many words to write anyways. Last article, and basically this is the third recording. I recorded in the afternoon, but not well, so my recording got bad. So this is my late night 9:25. Okay, India prepared for climate refugees, Centre tells Lok Sabha. I have a question. Let's read the. Let's do the article, then we'll do the question. So the opposition members said that you have made certain commitments in the Glasgow summit. You said we will have, not mentioned over here, I'm just adding. You said you will add 1,000 gigawatt of electricity. Of this, 50% will be from renewables. We will be carbon neutral by 2070. We know that the global warming is taking place. So global temperature is increasing by 2 degrees Celsius. As a result of this, there will be sea level rise, there will be soil erosion, there will be difficulties in agriculture, whatever factors. And as a result of this, there will be climate refugees, because the place that they were living is no longer there. For example, what about Bombay? What will happen to Bombay in next couple of years, next decades? Who knows? It doesn't exist. Or maybe some other places. Maybe what happens is that there is degradation of the land. That land that was suitable for cultivation is no longer suitable. What happened in the Indus Valley civilization? Most of it is desert today, but at some point of time it was a forested area. We have the soil analysis, we have the burned bricks. How do you burn? By burning trees. So there must have been trees over there. The region Sindh desert, it's coming from the Sindh, is basically the Greek for cotton, Sindon, cotton, right? So that way. So there may be climate refugees. Are you ready for this? Centre says yes. And I'm surprised because they never are. So they say yes. Right? We are ready for this. We have made commitments under the COP, but that is not being ready for this thing. Okay. They say that we have a National Adaptation Fund. Basically, because of the climate change, whatever changes will take place. So for that, we need to adapt. For that, we'll need money. So National Adaptation Fund, and we will need disaster resilience infrastructure. So for that, we need fund. Right, so all of this will take care of climate refugees. Fine, brilliant. Now they also said that, see, we are a very responsible country. I somewhere have difficulty in accepting this fact, but this is a fact from the government and please feel free to use it. So it says that by 2013, COP15, in the Paris summit, now we are in COP26, so 15 plus 7. Fine, so whatever is the maths, so COP15, it doesn't go 9 years, right? So COP15 in Paris, that by 2030, 30% of our energy needs will be from fossil fuels. So they say that 40% of our energy needs from non-fossil fuels. We are already there at 40%, which I find it difficult. Otherwise, why would the Indian government say that we will only increase our capacity by 50%? So that I have a doubt, and I have done an assessment of this also. But anyways, the government says that 40% of energy is coming from non-fossil fuels. Right, so from this, and by 2030 it will be at 62%. And then it said that the developed countries, Western nations, should take historic responsibility of this situation, whatever has happened, because the climate change more or less is because of the industrial revolution that took place in Britain, then America and the European countries, while at that time we were still reeling under the colonial Raj. So we need development. We cannot, we know we don't have the resources also, we don't have the know-how also. So all of this, so common but differentiated responsibilities. Now let's come to the question. The increasing climate change is increasing, or global warming, so poses, climate change and global warming are two different things. Okay, so increasing climate change poses several unseen and foreseen challenges. Some things that we can see, maybe we can foresee that a sea level rise will take place. We can foresee that some areas will not be conducive for agriculture. And there are some things which we cannot see, we cannot imagine. We didn't imagine that because of the climate change, global warming that is taking place, we didn't imagine that the polar region will shift further to the south, and the Americas will be under extreme winter environment. We see during the summer months also, sometimes it's very, very cold, blizzards over there. We don't know what will happen with the monsoonal system, with the breaking of the Arctic, so we don't know about that. So unseen and foreseen challenges, and there are a number of challenges. Okay, discussing the severity of the situation, use some facts, use some indicators. Specifically to India, suggest suitable mitigation measures. Right, so suggest some measures over here. So here, I don't have additional content over here, but yes, what you can do is you can bring out the challenges associated with climate change. You can talk about the increase in temperature, the need to keep it below 2.2 Celsius, but it seems that we will breach this. Specifically with reference to the lack of progress on this path. Then discussing the severity of the situation because of this climate change, maybe the monsoonal system effects, and our agriculture is monsoon dependent. Look at the heat waves that are taking place, right? So it's just the winter had concluded and there is a heat wave. So heat wave is there. How do we deal with that heat wave? We are looking at the heat action plan. Air conditioning should be standardized. We are a water stressed country. 600 million, half of our population is water stressed. This we know from the Composite Water Management Index. So there are n number of possibilities. So discuss the scope of disasters also could be there. So use some facts, use these points, just list it down. Then suggest suitable mitigation measures. And I think what should help you is what you should do for your prelims also. Read about the National Action Plan on Climate Change also. And actually you can just type climate change and type PIB next to it. You will get what the government is doing to solve this issue. And it's actually the same things which are listed over here. That is why I didn't refer the PIB. Right then, so here again we have certain situations. So extreme weather events, drought, water scarcity. Right then, so this concludes the session. So thank you for streaming in to IS Primers with me, Shubhashish. Bye bye, take care and all the best.